So type is really the most useful of all of the parameters that you would probably use in an input box besides prompt, which is required. And it specifies the data type that this input box is taking. And you've got a few options here. Link in the description to Excel's actual documentation where you can see these. Otherwise, the chart is here on the screen. So type 0 is formula, and it's probably one of your most useful ones. And we'll get into the use cases a little bit later. But it's kind of like range, where you can take in a range object and do some math. But it's a little bit more useful because you won't get type errors if you put in a number or a text. So it's kind of your catch-all. So it's really cool. Let's take a look at a quick example. So in here, if we were to hit enter, we would just get it a function that returns that string. Let's try typing in a number. You get a function that returns the number. This is where it gets a little bit weird. So let's try running this. And let's actually go into the workbook, and let's do that times that, and you'll see everything looks normal here. But if we hit OK, we get a different formula. We get equals R1C1 times R1C3. So that stands for your row 1, column 1, which is A1, and your row 1, column 3, which is C1. And we'll get into in another video how to actually use these formulas being output. But for now, let's keep talking about all of the different data types we can take in. So a value of 0 is a formula data type. If you were to put in a value, which we just saw, if you were to put in a value of 1, you get a number. So let's take a look at that. So in here, if we hit OK, all of a sudden we get number is not valid, and it lets us retry. So now let's do 0. We get 0. Awesome. So that's one way of making sure that somebody inputs a number. And then here we can type in 2, and 2 is text, a string. So let's try running that, and let's just use our default, and it works. But let's run it again, and let's type in a number. It still works because it can read a number as a string. So number is very, very strict. String allows you to basically type anything you want. So that's kind of cool. 4 is a logical value. So let's try that. And let's try this. Logical value is not valid. Okay, let's type in true. There we go. We get true. But what happens if we maybe don't make it all caps? It still works. Let's try some random capitalizations. It doesn't matter. As long as it's true or false, it works. But now in some logical conventions, you can type in a 1 or a 0. In that case, 1 is 0. 1 is true, 0 is false. What happens if you just type in T? Well, you're going to get logical value is not valid. So make sure that you have either true or false or 0 or 1 for that type 4. So now type 8, and this is really where we get the maximum use out of Application.InputBox. I personally love it. It is really great because you can do a range. So this is really cool. Let's take a look at what happens. So if we hit OK, the reference you typed is not valid, or you did not provide a reference where one was required. So this wants us to select a range, and we can actually click and select in Excel, and we get a type error, and that is because we can't message box a range. So that's pretty cool. But this output is actually a range, and we can use that range just like we would if it were being input into a function. So we will get into that later when we start using this. This is just an intro, everything you need to know. So type 16 is a little weird. It's an error value. I personally have not been able to get it to work. I've done some research. To me, it just doesn't seem that helpful because if you're doing something like formula or range, you'd be able to do some error checking there. So we're just going to move right along. Okay. Now our last one is 64, an array of values. Let's take a look at how this works. So if we run this, and let's just hit enter to see what happens again. Again, we get array value is not valid. But what happens if we select just a couple of ranges, enter? we again get that error on our message box because we cannot message box an array of values. Array just is very similar to that range object, except it pulls the values. Okay, awesome. So we've really learned all you need to know about how to use Application.InputBox, and we're going to start doing some more important things with it in future videos. I just wanted to do a quick introduction. That way, in the next videos, we can start really putting it to use. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and please do something awesome.